toad priests, toad shrine, toad magic, toad mummies, toad monsters, toad gargoyles. Yep, you guessed it, we're off to the Croaking Fane. Hi everyone, I'm Gary, and today we are going to talk about a module that I absolutely adore called the Croaking Fane. Now, those of you that have been following the channel for like a long time are probably rushing to the keyboard to tell me, but Gary, you already did a review of the Croaking Fane, which is true. My review of the Croaking Fane was one of the first videos on this channel, and back then my equipment was terrible, my editing was terrible, and worse, I hadn't really got a handle on the structure that I wanted to use for these reviews. So this is a sort of a do-over, a re-examination of that module where I hope to cover the module in a way that I'm more satisfied with and in a way that I hope will convince more of you to try it, which is ultimately what I'm attempting to do. The old video is still available. You can see it if you click on the link that's at the bottom of the description, but it is delisted now and only available by kind of clicking that link. Anyways, on with this review. So let's do the, what I'd call the rundown of the module of the Croaking Fane. The Croaking Fane is a third level adventure for Dungeon Crawl Classics, authored by Michael Curtis. The cover artist and cartographer is the absolutely peerless Doug Kovacs, and the interior art is full with pieces by Jim Holloway, Peter Mullen, Brad McDevitt, and Stefan Poag. Sorry if I pronounce any of those names wrong, I've only ever seen them written down. The module consists of 14 pages plus a couple of handouts and maps. The main adventuring area of the module is a ruined temple, which has 2 levels and consists of a total of 24 keyed locations. The authors tell us in the opening information for Game Masters that the module is best used as a sort of kind of side quest to be slotted into an ongoing campaign, and it gives some advice on exactly how to do that. Now, as we're about to dive into the narrative through line, let me just lay out my own kind of good faith, my own bona fides with the Croaking Fane. I've run the module 3 times now, twice in real life and once online. Two of the times I kind of ran the module, it was part of an ongoing campaign, and once it was a one-shot. Each time I used my own in-house system, Journeyman Expert Master with the Advanced Fantasy supplement. You can see a free version of that rule set also in the description below. Now, each time I ran the Croaking Fane, the module was completed in a single session of adventuring, and similarly, each time I've run this module, it has gone down really well with my groups and continues to be one of those kind of like off-the-shelf modules in my kind of like personal like library that I just kind of feel like I've got to keep coming back to or can keep coming back to, when it presents itself. So what's the through line? What's the kind of overall like story? What's it actually about, the Croaking Fane? The module is a true sword and sorcery romp through a crumbling, mold-encrusted temple. Eons ago in the mythic past, a great and terrible toad god known as Shapigrodas rose to ascendancy. The cult's power was as awesome as it was terrible. On the cosmic level, one of Shapigrodas' spawn, a lesser toad god known as Bob, I'm just going to say Bob, was plotting to overthrow his father. As the years passed, Shapigrodas' kind of power waned and Bob's power grew. Eventually, the followers of this newer toad god were able to rebel and almost destroy Shapigrodas and his cult. Now, many centuries later, the original cult of Shapigrodas is growing once more, and one of their ancient temples, the Croaking Fane, has been reoccupied. It's up to the players to investigate the Fane and kind of haul away as much treasure as they dare to take from such a profane place. As the player characters discover the location of the Fane and begin to wander around its slimy halls, they are likely to come face to face with the followers of the Toad God themselves. So with that simple narrative out of the way, let's discuss what makes the Croaking Fane so brilliant, and why, even after running it several times, I kind of can't seem to stop myself from coming back to it. The module skews into the hilarious easily, and that's, the primary reason for that's primarily because of its theme. There are so many toad and frog-themed encounters here that, should you not mention this to the players before they enter, it won't take long before they're kind of like laughing along with it and rolling their eyes at the sheer absurdity of the amount of toad and like frog and batrachian references. I've said before that most adventures benefit from having a strong theme. It's clearing the best adventures out there. Winter's Daughter, for example, has the Celtic fairy forts. Curse of Strahd has that like brooding gothic fantasy horror. Even if an adventure's theme is sort of fantasy inflected, the best adventures always seem to go as hard as they can into their own theme, and the Croaking Fane is no exception to this. But what makes it so special is the near kind of gonzo absurdity of the theme, which amounts to lots of things to do with toads and frogs. While practically every encounter has some link to this overarching theme, the relative shortness of the whole module means that it doesn't really ever overstay its welcome, and it's not like the encounters aren't varied as to what they require from the players. For example, when the characters first enter the Fane, they're most likely to encounter a sort of baptismal basin frothing with scum churned up by hundreds of flesh-eating tadpoles in the water. As they explore, they're also probably going to come across embalmed and mummified dead giant frogs. But the best encounter I've run from the top level of this temple is the toad goyles. As the characters walk down the main sort of aisle of the chapel, stone gargoyles carved into the forms of kind of toads with wings leap down from several hidden niches and assault the party. This sort of silliness continues as the party heads to the Undercroft, and they begin to kind of hear what they first take to be sort of distant noises before reaching a submerged cavern thick with giant frogs. I have to read you the end of the description for this cavern room. The water's surface ripples with masses of black tadpoles that swim and slither through its depths. The croaking, ye gods, the croaking! A hellish chorus resounds in the echoing cavern, with each guttural voice crying out a noise that sounds unsettlingly like murder, murder, murder. Now, I know not everyone likes kind of box text that, I just read, but you'd be a total fool to ever ignore that one. It's my suggestion that this is the best piece of box text ever written. The module also does something that many DCC modules do really well, and that's leading the party to a sort of climactic pulp action finale. There's the opportunity for the player characters to release a cultist who's being punished by the rest of the cult. He's always a kind of really hilarious NPC to play, and usually the players do choose to release him. But the thing is, he kind of immediately betrays the party at the first opportunity. If the party manage to sneak up on the cult, on the lowest level of the dungeon, it's unlikely they'll be able to spend ages debating amongst themselves on how to play it, as the aforementioned cultist is likely to just rush from the hiding spot, loudly proclaiming the character's presence. My parties have always loved to hate those sorts of characters. There's also the opportunity for you to bring in a kind of massive, gigantic toad monster to help the cult, which I always have kind of just interpreted as a frog hemoth. It can make the battle at the end kind of really epic, as the monster and the cultists are all breaking pillars, throwing players around and just generally causing havoc. On occasion, I've actually had the roof begin to kind of collapse and the swamp above begin to sort of rush in. It all makes for an explosive ending reminiscent of the best days of high adventure. Now, with that kind of stuff out of the way, it is worth saying that if you're enjoying this video, please hit like and subscribe. All that stuff helps. In the description below, you'll find a link to the Discord server where we discuss Journeyman Expert Master and generally talk tabletop role-playing games. So, having discussed the strong parts of this module, what concerns should you have if you take this and decide to run the Croaking Fane? And what advice could I give you as someone who has successfully game mastered this module multiple times? Well, firstly, let's get the simple stuff out of the way. Like all DCC modules, the detail is kind of often overwritten. It's very dense, the prose. And it doesn't really kind of hold your hand as to helping you to the juiciest bits of the content or to the elements of the module that will be really useful to know really a sense of mastery of at the table. I don't really resent the module, any DCC kind of module for this quibble, because I suppose it's kind of part of their style. But it is worth letting you know this, especially if you've never read or run a DCC adventure before. Another minor issue that I have is that the backstory for the Fane feels, kind of contrived to make it needlessly complex. I don't really understand why you need to have two competing gods of Batrachians, or Batrachians, however you say that word, warring with each other than the fact that the younger one, the one that's not really relevant to the adventure, is the one that clerics in a game of DCC kind of may worship. It feels like the designers wanted to lead the game master and party around the houses a little, because they wanted to have a toad-themed adventure whose challenges couldn't just be kind of circumnavigated by the party having a cleric who just happens to worship the main toad god of the DCC setting. Lastly, You may also be sat there thinking to yourself, okay, Gary, does the module actually kind of like overdo it with the toads and the frogs? And if I'm being really honest, it does not. This is the best part. Now, I also think it's worth just taking a look at the booklet itself, so you get a kind of sense of what you're buying if you decide to give the Croaking Fane a shot. Now, as I already said, the exterior cover was done by Doug Kovacs, as was much of the interior art. Opening it up, we have both this kind of like great handout for the large cavern and this amazing bit of art for the toad goyles. I always show these to the players. Flipping through, we can see that the entries are listed in the traditional kind of like format with, having italicized read aloud text at the top, followed by Game Master's information below. In the back of the booklet, there's more awesome cartography by Kovacs. I always try and show my players these bits of maps because they just look so like impressive. It's a real shame that, Goodman Games never packaged their modules with player-friendly maps, like ones without all the secret doors on and everything. Because I would love to just use these sorts of materials in a way that allows my players to also appreciate the craftsmanship and the passion that seemingly goes into every DCC module, at least all the ones that I've come across and read, and I've read a lot of them. Now, this brings me to my final words on the module. What, if any, are the kind of complementary fantasies, supplementary material that might support you in running the Croaking Fane? I don't have many, but I'm compelled weirdly to kind of recommend any that have kind of like slightly over the top traps and a kind of pulpy sort of feel to kind of like temples and dungeons. Things like Indiana Jones, the Temple of Doom, as well as like the 1990s like Mummy franchise, both work for me to help me evoke that almost kind of camp silliness of the module with its unrealistic depiction of a kind of fictional evil temple. I'm suddenly prompted to recommend the opening section of H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth, in which the protagonist is slowly being kind of drawn towards a decrepit fishing village with a sinister reputation. The opening segments of that novella, I mean, you should just read the whole thing, but the opening segments, the main character gets to see some kind of strange and alien jewelry taken from like the unknowable cities of a malevolent star god, which vaguely resembles a kind of fish and the toad cross. If nothing else, that story will give you plenty of words for like slime and plenty of ways of saying toad or frog-like, hopefully kind of like equipping you with the right vocabulary to run this module. Now that just about finishes my thoughts on the Croaking Fane. I hope you found it interesting. I hope this review is more useful than the first one I did. Let me know about your thoughts of this module in the comments, especially if you think there's some other kind of media that I should have mentioned in the kind of like supplementary material section. Below you'll find a link to the module on drive-through, as well as links to Journeyman Expert Master. Now, thank you for taking the time to listen to this. I'm Gary, and I'll speak with you again soon.